It's a test that everyone has to take, and everyone is scored the same way.
It is a sometimes state, sometimes federal mandated set of criteria that students must meet through a certain type of test that everyone is given.
It's a test that is given to all people, all students of a certain grade, and it has the same questions and they're all scored in the same way.
I'm not a very big fan of it. I think it's not a good way to measure academic growth like it's supposed to, and I think it isn't a good system for testing.
So say my English is not my first language. I might not do as well on the writing test as someone who is better at speaking English.
Even though I don't feel any kind of pressure to do well on like TCAPs, there are a lot of students who really do, and it kind of negatively hurts them.
In some standardized tests, there are directions that are created that says, here is what you do if a child vomits on the paper. Now, if we have a direction about that, there's got to be a system that says these children may be so panicked, might be so stricken by fear, that it drives them to that kind of response.
I did feel a lot of pressure to perform well because the schools emphasize them so much, especially when it comes to school funding. And I know, for instance, my mom was a special ed teacher, and her students who weren't on the same level as anybody else in the school, their scores counted against the school, so they put more pressure on students to perform better to even that out so that the school would get better funding.
I went through schooling in Pennsylvania, so we had the Pennsylvania State Assessment tests there, and depending on how we did, we would get an extra sticker on our diploma. So going through school, it was highly encouraged that we perform well to get that stamp of approval or stamp of excellence or seal of excellence on our diploma, but after we got our diploma and graduated, it was never talked about again.
I really hate cut and dry writing. I like narratives and fictional writing, and I've written like that in the past and gotten penalized for it in scores. And this time I just wrote exactly what they wanted to hear, and it was tedious and painful.
They're narrow. They narrow the curriculum. They're not looking at all the huge features, behavioral features that go into performance, like self-discipline and self-worth and self-respect and enthusiasm and creative thinking and critical thinking and effort. All those things that go in cannot just be measured and filling in a bubble on the standardized test.
Standardized testing doesn't necessarily take into account whether or not a student may have a gift in art or may have a gift in social skills or might have a gift in other areas. When you look at just English and mathematics, which tend to be the areas that are more addressed in standardized testing, students are going to fall across the gamut just by their natural skills.
Now, when we take tests, we look at the performance of children on the entire spectrum, the entire gamut. So we're testing children that are not only academically bent, but also technically bent, but they're all taking the same tests. The rest of the world is not like that. Most of the rest of the world, when they say high school students, they're really talking about high school students who have been focused in the academic domain. That's a very different thing. I think that that's the goal. I do. I think that that's the intent. It is not the reality.
Standardized testing only really measures if you're able to learn in a certain way. And I don't think everybody is able to learn in that specific way, or that they are necessarily able to show how smart they are through a set of standard questions.
It's important for us to know when children in a certain school district, in a certain state, in a certain country are significantly lower on the same general test than others, so that we know how to intervene and how to countermand and how to reprogram and how to modify, so that all children will get a better education, will get an education that we owe them.
I do think we need to have a more open standardized testing system, or perhaps different types of tests for different learners or different levels.
The emphasis on standardized testing needs to go away. I think that to provide a whole picture of someone, it needs more than just a standardized test.
It's got to be standardized testing and teacher observation and criterion measures that have to do with these specific children and a growth index. A growth index. I don't think that we're doing well enough. I think that we're doing a disservice to children when we have a bar that's here. It says, this is where you must reach. And it doesn't make any difference how well you're growing toward that. The only thing that is looked at is, have you achieved the bar? Well, I think that is going to have to end, because we are having more and more of our children in our society who are not going to be able to get that bar because their start has not been strong enough. I think that the questions that are being asked are important questions, and that if we don't answer them wisely, we're going to create, or we're going to continue to create, a wider and wider chasm between, quote unquote, the haves and the have-nots. And I think that chasm potentially can bring down our society, can destroy it. I do.
Thank you.